I grew up with very casual games, I will say. Like, I played mostly Just Dance, and there was a Just Dance that was Michael Jackson, and so I played that. And a lot of the, like, Pokemon games, like, I played Poke Park 1 and 2. Those were, like, my favorite games ever when I was a kid. I just that was, like, the first game I ever beat by myself, so I was very proud of
It's
myself.
your Ocarina of Time, Poke Park.
Yeah.
Despite all the kind of weird video game stuff I'm into today, sometimes in my heart I feel like I'm still ultimately a Nintendo guy. But that being said, it's definitely more challenging for me to appreciate modern Nintendo than when I was younger and much more enthusiastic about them. And I think that's kind of natural, right? As we get older, we kind of solidify our worldview, and it becomes a lot harder to look at things from different lenses, right? So one of the challenges I've really had is understanding why people love modern Nintendo. And so I really wanted to talk to a younger fan of Nintendo with a different perspective than I have. And thankfully, I was able to get in contact with Josie of the Josie Woah YouTube channel. I don't know if Josie Woah or the Woah is her last name or if that's just part of her YouTube name. But she's primarily a Nintendo YouTuber. And we previously kind of contacted each other relating with the Buddy Mission Bond video I did. So I kind of wanted to follow up with her and just have a greater conversation about what she appreciates about Nintendo. A lot of her YouTube channel is talking about, the Nintendo Switch, and also kind of looking back at a lot of Nintendo classics like Ocarina of Time, Super Metroid, and Donkey Kong Country. So I really wanted to understand, what her perspective was, especially after like digging into what games she grew up on and kind of what influenced her. So we talk a lot about those kind of Nintendo classics, her view on them, as well as, what makes the Switch great for her, and also what she wants out of the Switch too. I will warn you, for some reason, I don't know, I have like a mouth of a sailor on this podcast, so I do curse a lot, more so than usual, so I'm just letting you know that ahead of time in case that's a problem. Before I contacted you, I went and looked at a handful of your videos from the last year, and one thing really stood out to me, and that was you seem to mention Ocarina of Time over the course of multiple videos, and
Mhm.
having kind of I don't know if a strained relationship is the right word for it, having kind of a turmoil in how you do it. And I think what was interesting to me was you earlier that year, I believe, mentioned like you kind of were done with Ocarina of Time. Then I think at the end of the year, backlog wise, you're like, I need to play through Ocarina of Time. I'm kind of curious, where are your feelings right now with Ocarina of Time? And just yeah, maybe give a little explanation of that whole situation to some
Yeah.
extent.
Okay. For sure. So, most of the time that I mention it in my videos, I'm kidding because I just get a lot of heat for it. People, like, come at me all the
Gotcha.
time, right?
Yeah.
Like, my Twitter inbox is abysmal. So,
Well, what does
like
that mean? What does it mean for your Twitter inbox to be abysmal? What kind of
well, it's like
abysmal is
people are
in
like,
there?
"What the hell is wrong?" Or they're just, like, really aggressive about why I don't like Ocarina of Time. They're like,
Okay.
"You're a" people say that I'm, like, parading around as a gamer to get views, and I was like, "Dude, if I wanted to get views on YouTube, like, I would make a drama channel. I wouldn't be talking about
Yeah,
video
yeah, yeah,
games."
yeah.
So it's just, like, a lot of accusations are thrown around, and I think, Ocarina of Time is it's a game in my eyes that hasn't aged very well, and to be fair, I stopped at the water temple, but since I was a kid, I've tried to get into it, I've tried to play it, I've tried so much with this game. Um, and it just sort of over the years, I like it never grabbed me really, and so I'm gonna try to go back because I do think I need to beat it. Like, for me to have as much of an opinion about it as I do, like, I do need to actually play and finish the game. Um, but in the meantime, I'm gonna make some jokes about how people think I hate the game,
Yeah.
and, like, I don't really care about it enough to hate it. I just, like it's not my thing, you know?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
when
yeah.
people hear that about, like, their favorite game of all time, it hurts a little. So, I get it, but, yeah, it's genuinely not for me for the most part, and I will play it and maybe my whole opinion changes, but yeah, right now it's not great for me.
Well, you're pretty deep in. And I don't know if a lot about Ocarina of Time changes between the water temple and the end of it, right? Maybe the question would be curious to ask is like what would you describe as like the parts of that game that have not aged well?
Um, yeah, that's a good question. So it's just kind of like I think I have a similar problem with almost every N64 game. It's the
Mm.
N64. It's early 3D, right? Like
Mhm.
that is so just the quality of life features are not there. It's like I don't know. I go through this whole thing. I have no idea where I'm going. I finally get to where I'm going, but the camera's like tweaking all over the place. I have no idea what I'm looking at. Uh, like it's just and that was groundbreaking at the time, but I grew up in the Wii generation, so, like, it just wasn't groundbreaking to return to, you know? Like, I
Yeah.
totally understand why it's such a big, impactful game and why people love it. I genuinely do think it's a very important title. It's just, like, early 3D is really hard to go back to. The movement in that game is pretty tough. It's just like I have a similar issue with Mario 64, which probably is my most hot topic thing that I say. That's a good game. It's a very good game. But the controls and the camera and all of that suck so bad that it is so ripe for a remake. And honestly, if they were to remake Ocarina of Time, I'd probably love it. Because like the fundamental of the Zelda game that
Technically,
is
they did,
there
right? The 3DS version.
I don't know if that counts though. You know,
Okay.
you can't remake it on a console that doesn't have an actual like like second stick.
Okay, gotcha, yeah. So the
Um,
second stick is a very important part of that style of game for you
or
think,
just
like
like modernize it to like have some maybe like if they sort of modernized it in like a Breath of the Wild engine or something like that or like a Twilight
Mm,
Princess engine where it's just it's easy to control the camera, the movement is improved and they have some quality of life features like waypoints or anything like that. And it's not because I get comments all the time that it's like, it's because you can't critically think about where you need to go. Like, I get it. I can think about where I need to go if I need to. But I'm from a generation that is waypoint here, waypoint there, like mess around in between and do
yeah.
whatever you want. And that's what I like to do, honestly. I mean, Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom are some of my favorite games. So,
When I was a kid, well, maybe not when I was a kid, sorry. Generally, maybe when I was younger. When I was your age, actually,
mhm.
probably around like early 20s, right? I think one of the things I kind of felt with like 8-bit RPGs was there was so little guidance on where you should go that it was like I don't want to sit here and like talk to every NPC and try to like
Yes.
figure it out, right? And I know people who do really like 8-bit RPGs, and it's interesting that yeah, I think because I never played a 8-bit RPG growing up, it was really challenging for me to appreciate some of the things that I think people still liked about them.
Hmm.
Um, which was kind of interesting that like Breath of the Wild feels like it went back to the original Legend of Zelda more than anything else, right?
Hmm.
Um, and I never really like loved the original Legend of Zelda. So it was kind of this weird like throwback thing they did that kind of went further back than I even wanted with that on Breath of the Wild. I'd be curious because you mentioned that with Ocarina of Time, you're like it's a very important game, and you understand and you can kind of see that. And that was one of those games that like I was like 8 when that game came out, so it was like hot, like
Hmm.
probably like informed a lot about what I view about video games growing up. What do you view as like the valuable things in Ocarina of Time, for that
Yeah,
generation?
that's a good question. I think it
Hmm.
just like sort of pioneered a lot of mechanics, right? Like the
Hmm.
Z targeting and the combat in a 3D space and just like a new type of explorative game, you know,
Yeah.
cuz at that point from what I'm understanding is there weren't very many games that were like that. That was huge. So,
Hmm.
obviously a stepping stone for the gaming industry is never going to be something to like laugh at or think is stupid or whatever because it's not and it's very impressive what they did. Um I do think, however, we should be able to talk about it in more of a not nostalgia objective way where you look at it now and you think, "Can I go back and play this game?" And some people, absolutely. But for others, you know, and even I know gamers like much older than me that have very similar opinions about like going back to that game because it's just aged. But yeah, I mean, obviously it did important stuff, and it was just like I mean, people, you know, consider it like one of the best games of all time, which is fucking crazy to me, but they do, and, I think that's just because of the impact it had on the industry. So, it's like Skyrim, you know, you never wanna, like that game is it's a great game, but, you can see more, like, what it did for the gaming industry, I think, than just being the game itself, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I personally have trouble with those kind of games usually, and it's part of why, like, I was interested in what you thought about Ocarina of Time because it was, like, a part of my childhood, it's really hard for me to disconnect myself from it in that regard,
Mhm.
right? Um, and I think Ocarina of Time is a type of game that when it comes out, it's so impactful and so big, I kinda start to dislike it later, mostly because so many other games took a lot of the foundations it set, and so many games built on top of it. So it's, like, really
Right.
hard for me to go back to Ocarina of Time when it is in some ways the way I used to make this comparison, I don't know if this is, like, an apt comparison, is, like, if you buy a single story house, Ocarina of Time is like the single story house, and everything that came after it is, like, the second story on a single story house. And
Yeah.
some people will always prefer just having a single story house that's, like, really good in the first place, but also adding stuff on top is, like, to me, adding stuff on top just, like, is an extra layer that I appreciate on that. And so
Right.
just removing that doesn't really, like, impress me in any way. There's a game that I've been, Chrono Trigger. I haven't played Chrono Trigger. I, I don't know if I ever will. I keep saying I'll play Chrono Trigger, but like games like that, it's really hard for me to go back and like appreciate them the way they were. Like, what do you think is important about appreciating games in that regard for you as somebody who doesn't like that game? Because I think that's something I struggle with is like, why do I sit down and play these games that I know I'm probably not going to like, but it seems important that I play it?
Yeah. I think maybe just for the history of it, like, to keep that alive
Mhm,
and to see I think, like, there are games where I can disconnect myself from, like, the time that I grew up and put myself
mhm.
into more of an, "Okay, if this came out when I was a kid and
Yeah.
it completely changed everything, then it would be a huge, huge deal to me." So, like, I understand where people are coming from, and I think for me, it's more of a like, really the reason I played initially a lot of these, like, well, but, like, when I was, like, 13, I tried to play Ocarina of Time because a bunch of people were like, "This is the best game of all time."
Mm, mm.
So, I wanted to understand why people said that, and then I would go and play it, and I was like, "Oh, they said that because they're a lot older than me and a
Yeah.
very different generation of gamer who has nostalgia." Which is totally fine.
Mhm.
And I think now, I just beat the whole original Donkey Kong trilogy, and Donkey Kong 2 was, like, insane. That game is crazy, crazy. Um,
Like crazy in what way? I actually never played that one.
Super hard,
Mm, mhm.
incredibly hard. I mean, it's weird because if you're good at it and if you've played it before, I think you could probably beat that game in, like, 10 hours, but it was my first playthrough of it, and it took me for every the final world, for every level, I was on each level for probably, like, 2 to 3 hours because it was so insane. Um, and so, yeah, I don't know, I just think, like, I have an appreciation for older things always, like, I love older movies and things like that, so I just wanna see where it came from, and it is cool to see, like, the blueprint of things, like, I can see why Ocarina of Time is such a big deal because it is that blueprint for the new 3D adventure games, but the blueprint isn't the final product, so it, like, doesn't always need to be, like, perfect, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I kind of feel that way with a little bit with a Link to the Past, where it's like it feels like a lot of people when I was younger, when there's a lot of arguments about 3D and 2D Zelda back then. I don't know if it's still a thing today, but when
Mhm.
I was younger, there's a lot of arguments like how 3D Zelda was versus 2D Zelda. And a lot of people would say a Link to the Past is or Ocarina of Time is just a 3D carbon copy of Link to the Past, and that's what makes it worse than a Link to the Past. It's like it is that, but slowed down. There's way too much space, that kind of thing. And so I think I part of it's like I with like blueprints of series, like I wonder if like everyone has their own blueprint, and so where that begins and what their expectations are different. Because I know back in the day that was like a topic that would come up from time to time.
Yeah.
Um, what do you like in Ocarina of Time? I know you say you generally don't like it, but what, if anything, do you find that you enjoy about it?
I do think it's cool to see the world in 3D in that way, where it's so old and I'm, like, running around and I'm like, "Oh,
Hmm.
this is, like, kind of insane and fleshed out for such an early game."
Hmm.
Um,
Like maybe remove the history aspect of it. Like, what do you, if you were to play Ocarina of Time today, or you are, like, what do you
uh
find most enjoyable, kind of separate from that? 'Cause I don't think you think the game is trash, right? I don't get that impression.
No,
Yeah.
I don't. It's hard when you take out the history aspect because that's really how I try to approach that game. Because when I was a kid, I bought the game on the virtual console on the Wii U when I was, like, 13, and I was like, "Okay, everybody
Mhm.
thinks this is the best game ever, I need to play it." And then I got, like, 2 hours in, and I was like, "This sucks," and then I put it down. Um, God, I
And it
like
doesn't have to be unique about Ocarina of Time, just something that you enjoy about it now, I guess. Because it
okay,
could be something that showed up in later Zeldas, and you're just like, "It did it better there, but I still like it here," kinda thing, right?
okay. Um, I do like the dungeons and the battling, like, the combat in that game is pretty decent. I think it's obviously been very much refined, but it was cool to see where it came. I mean, literally all my reasoning is because it's, like, history.
Well, let me say this about, like, Ocarina of Time's dungeons. I think out of every Zelda game, or any Zelda game, 3D ones, I think it has the best dungeon variety. There are so many
Mhm.
dungeons in that game, and I think they sprawl across a ton of different types. I don't know if any future Zelda really ever does that super well. I think Twilight Princess comes somewhat close, but I think a lot of them have a lot less dungeons overall.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think that's like one of the nice things about Ocarina of Time. Just feels like they just did every type of dungeon they could think of and try to shove like some different ideas in each of those. Um, if I try to like take myself out of like when I was 8, because when I was 8, I was not thinking about that, right? When I was 8, I was just like, this is the first video game I ever beat. How crazy is this? I beat a video game, right?
Mhm.
But like I think when I think back today of what I like about Ocarina of Time, that's probably the number one thing.
Mhm.
Um, so I wonder if anything. I'm trying to think if any that opinion has changed. Because I probably have thought that for the last like 10 years now. And sometimes when I think about things from 10 years ago that I said, I'm like, actually, that's not true, even though I said it very confidently. But I try to reevaluate that. I think that's probably still true though. So, um,
Yeah. I
I
think the story is kinda good too. I do like the story
mm,
for the most part.
I don't even really remember the story. I mean, I know the baseline, but like I don't remember how it's presented. Really, there's not a lot of cutscenes in that game.
Yeah, no, but
So
I remember, like, being sort of impressed by parts of that.
yeah, yeah. Um, you did mention because before I reached out to you, I initially was thinking, it's like I'm going to reach out to Josie, talk to her about Nintendo stuff because she's like a Nintendo fan that's significantly younger than me. And I think I mentioned to you that I've been kind of reflecting on my experience as a Nintendo fan growing up recently and trying to better understand how that like left me where I am today.
Mhm.
Um, I was surprised to hear in your videos they're like, oh, the Wii and DS were like the first systems that really kind of defined what you liked about games, right? Is that accurate? I
Yeah.
seem to recall that, and I think you mentioned that a little bit earlier.
Mhm.
I kind of just get an idea of like what did that experience look like for you? Because I was like 16 when the Wii came out, and the Wii was a hugely important system for me. Um, but I think probably there's very different reasons why me and you have it was
Well,
a hugely
yeah,
important system. So yeah,
yeah. The Wii came out in 2007, right?
I think it's late 2006. I could be wrong,
Late
but
2006. Okay, yeah. So when it came out, I was like 3. Um, and then I think we got one in like 2008-ish because I remember being 5
mhm.
and playing it a lot. Um, my dad was a big time gamer, and so I like before that, I would play the PlayStation 2 a lot with him when I was little. I have like really early memories of that.
I've had multiple conversations with people about their dads playing games growing up, and every time I ask what kind of games were they into, so I guess I'm gonna ask again, what kind of games were your dad into?
He played like fighting games. It was a lot of Tekken, so I played a
Okay.
ton of Tekken.
Does he
And,
still play Tekken?
yeah, he did. Yeah.
Awesome. Is he in the fighting game community or just having a good time?
No, he just likes it.
Mm,
He just likes
that's cool.
playing those games and stuff. Then he got, like, really into, like, MMOs and stuff, but, um, yeah, so at that time, it was, fighting games and stuff like that that I was playing a lot of, and then the Wii came out, and my mom was excited about the Wii because it was more of, like, a casual thing, and she and so, like, I grew up with very casual games, I will say, like, I played mostly Just Dance, and there was a Just Dance that was Michael Jackson, and so I played that, and a lot of the, like, Pokemon games, like, I played Poke Park 1 and 2, those were, like, my favorite games ever when I was a kid, um,
And
and
you
then
probably would have been like 4 or 5 when Poke Park came out, right? Based off what
yeah, I was
yeah.
little. I was
Yeah.
very I just that was, like, the first game I ever beat by myself, so I was very proud of
It's
myself.
your Ocarina of Time, Poke Park.
Yeah. Um, and then, like, when I was a little bit older, I played Donkey Kong Country Returns, and that was, like, one of my favorite games ever for a long time,
Mm.
and I co-opted that with my dad for a while, and I just recently, like, beat the one that came out on the Switch, like a week ago, and it was funny because I was playing it, and I was like, "How in the hell did I beat this as a child?" Because it's hard, like, at points, like, very hard in that last level.
Kids are really good at video games, I think. There's some limitations they have, but there's some things they are really good at, I think. I've
Yeah,
my nephew plays a lot of games, and sometimes I'm impressed by what he can do, so
Yeah. I was like, I must have been, like, so stubborn. I also played it co-op, so I was like, I guess, like, hypothetically, my dad could have just done the whole thing for me, and I was just, like, continuously dying, which is probably what happened, but that's not how I remember it,
yeah.
um so, yeah, it was like that, and then I guess, like, really the other aspect that shaped it was the DS, and so I had a DS, and it was weird because my brother had all the really cool games, and then I would just get, like, the girl games, that
Yeah.
would come out for it. So I had, like, Barbie and all this crap for it, and, I
We
love this
respect Barbie games on this podcast, I will
Oh,
say.
that's good,
We,
that's good.
I the 3rd one I did was, she doesn't make videos anymore, but her name was, Princess Pokey, and,
Mm,
she was really into cozy games and games for girls, and I'm also into those games. I'm just not as attached to it as other people, I just kinda, like, dive in, and, yeah, I think there's a different value set that come with those games, and I
yeah,
think
for
if you
sure.
want that type of thing, it's good, but if you are looking for more normal video games, it's not particularly
Right,
good.
right. It's good if you grew up with it, I think, and have nostalgia.
I mm, I
Really?
unless you wanna go deep into this, I will say I disagree with that. I won't go deep into it unless you wanna go deep into
We
it,
can
but
go into it, sure.
yeah, so I think games for girls in general, so I just so you're aware, I did very much the, like, I was starting to write about games when I was, like, 18 or something like that, and then I probably didn't really start doing it more "professionally," in quotes, in
Mhm.
the way that people do until I was, like, 22. And I very much did that whole like, oh, look at me. I'm a grown adult playing games like Princess Debut and Style Savvy. How silly is this? Me, grown adult man. But I think there's a lot of things about those games when it comes to the ability to kind of express like yourself through like fashion and things like that that I really liked.
Uh-huh.
I tend to like things that have a little more of a mechanical focus. So like if you put a dress on, it might be there's an RPG I like called a Toka Doll, or it's an arcade RPG.
Mm.
And the dresses you put on changes the attacks your doll has and the resistances you have. So it's all about dressing up your doll, but it changes their fighting styles and things like that. And I thought that was very cool.
Have you played
Um,
Infinite Nikki or
I have
Infinity
not played
Nikki?
Infinite Nikki. I probably should. It is kind of I'm kind of weird about what games I play, so it's hard to know what I'm gonna end up playing. But
It's fair.
I do think there is a value set there that I enjoyed as an adult without having that nostalgia as a kid.
Mhm.
So I don't
That's
necessarily know
true.
if I have the words for it, but I will say that like I was able to get into it without the nostalgia aspect. So
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying you have to be a very specific type of gamer. You can't be like a
I would agree with that.
run-of-the-mill,
Yeah.
um yeah, so I played, like, games like that a lot on my DS, and I loved that kinda stuff, but then my brother had, like, the Pokemon games, and he had this Avatar: The Last Airbender game, and we were big Avatar: The Last Airbender family, so I would steal his games all the time and play them and everything, and I played a lot of Pokemon Black and White, and when I got older, he used to just hand them to me because he wasn't too stressed out about it, but,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. I grew up, I guess, with that kind of stuff, and a lot of it was very gimmicky. And so I've noticed even now I have a tendency to just like love gimmicky games, which is very weird. Because usually I play them and I'm super disappointed. So I don't know why I'm always like just elated when they get announced, but
The idea you like the idea more than you like the execution most of the time. Can you give
most
me
of the
some
time.
examples of some of those games?
Yeah, I guess a recent one would be like Nintendo Switch Sports. I was unbelievably excited for that. I don't think I've been excited for a game like that ever in my life. And like I love Tears of Kingdom, all that kind of stuff.
You played Wii Sports, I'd assume, as a
I grew
kid.
up on Wii Sports. Like that
Okay,
was my
yeah.
shit when I was little. Like I was like the pro level at
Mhm.
every single sport on there and like played it all the time. And even now, every time I go home, my friend has a Wii that's still like hooked up to his main TV and we play. like, for hours and hours, and it's like a bunch of 21-year-olds, like, we all come home and we're like, "Let's go play the Wii at our friend's house," and, like, I don't know, it's super goofy, but, yeah, so Switch Sports came out, and I was super duper excited, and I was, like, there day 1, I
Mhm.
pre-ordered, I did everything, I was super duper excited for that game, and then I put it in and played it a little bit, and it's not terrible, but it's not good. I mean, there's no magic to it, it feels like it has no personality, and, um, it's
Mm.
just there was something special, I think, about the Wii Sports games, and it could so much be because I'm nostalgic about it, but I was
Would you
sev
be able to solidify any of that disappointment, do you think? Like, are there things you can point to specifically?
I guess, like, the sport variety, like, we've got so many net games. Why is badminton not just a separate mode of tennis?
What's it called again?
Uh,
Switch Sports? I never played it. I probably should have
Switch
played it.
sport. Yeah, it's alright. Then, like, later down the line, they added, golf, and then I think they just recently added basketball, which is cool, but all of that is kind of, like, in my head, it's, like, too little too late because at launch, this thing was bare bones. Um The personality thing, it's like they really wanted to take the me's out, so they went with these things called sports buddies, and they suck. Like, they just look corporate and weird.
I don't
Um,
know how to I don't know if this is weird to say, but they look like a Korean design to me. Like, I feel like I've seen Korean 3D CG cartoons that that look
yeah,
like this. I'm
man,
not sure why.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just super strange. I
None of
was like,
these
"Why don't
sports
you get."
are new, right? Or are they new?
Yeah, some,
Because
like, volleyball was new, and volleyball was something I was excited for because I played, like, collegiate volleyball for a while, and I was a big volleyball player, so I was excited for that, and then, it was that was probably my favorite sport of that entire thing, but every other thing was disappointing. It's like, I didn't like that baseball wasn't there anymore. It's like, I think I kind of like in my head, I just wanted them to port over Wii Sports and make it slightly better.
which they kinda did on Wii U, if I recall
Yeah,
correctly.
Wii Sports Club was okay.
It was okay? Okay.
Yeah,
If
it
they just
wasn't.
ported that, do you think that would have worked? Or I don't know that I didn't play that either. I
It
probably should
used
have,
the
but
tablet so much that probably not, but like if they did a similar idea where they just adapted it over to the Switch, I think it would have been better.
I had no idea it used the tablet. That makes me significantly more interested in it.
Feel
I
like
feel like
in golf, you, like, put the tablet on the floor and you have the golf club and you, like, swing like it's the tee.
oh. So I had assumed it was just a straight port, and so I was
No,
kinda like, "I play Wii Sports, it's good. I don't need a 1080p me." Uh, so that
kinda lit.
I'm somebody I always loved the Wii U doing interesting stuff. I feel like either I didn't see enough Wii U tablet stuff happening, that I just kind of was never really focused in on it, or I kind of mentally blocked out Wii U tablet stuff happening. Zombie U, favorite Wii U game, I think is the game that uses the best use of the tablet, in my opinion.
Mhm,
So that's fascinating. I might have to actually play that now. So,
you should. It's a banger.
although I don't, can you buy it now? I think I don't know if they did a physical
Oh, I don't
release in
think
the
they did a
US.
physical, huh?
Yeah, no, well, no.
Well,
I will buy it in the way that you
yep,
can technically not really
yep,
buy it these days.
yep.
So so, yeah, I do really like that Poke Park is the first game you beat. I think that's really fun.
Oh, I love those games a lot. I
I
have
need to
so much
play them
nostalgia.
still, but I think
What did you grow up on?
like I mentioned earlier, I was like Nintendo 64 and stuff like
Okay.
that, right? So, I would say I was a very I am in a very different position than I was when I was a kid. I was very much a Nintendo fan.
Mhm,
Um and pretty much until the GameCube, I was doing kind of the normal stuff. And I think during the GameCube, I started to realize that like, hey, used games are like super cheap. And so if
mhm.
I take my $5 allowance a week, I can go buy a bunch of used games. And I just started buying a bunch of used GameCube games because nobody gave a shit. And that was I got like very expensive games for dirt cheap. I got Path of Radiance for $10, and
That's
that game
lit.
is ridiculously expensive. But it's I think that and then the Wii specifically in the same way that you like saying like, "Oh, I love looking at the Kamiki games." I think that changed how I looked at games in
Mm,
general because I was very much on the traditional Nintendo track, and then during like when the Wii launched, I think I very much shifted over to like I want gimmick games.
yeah,
And then I'd get like Mario Kart Wii and I'd be like, this is fine. But I want like Excite
something.
Truck was cool. Excite Truck rethinks how you get first place. I think that's awesome. It's like, hey, you don't have to get first place to get first place.
Right.
I think that's really neat. So, anyways, this is not a podcast about me per se, but,
No.
but yeah, I think for me, what's interesting to me about your experience with the Wii is that I think in one of your videos you mentioned the fact that you're like this was a very social game system for you, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so for me, I typically have had online friends my whole life, and the Wii, as you know, did not have the greatest online support.
Yeah.
So,
No.
typically I was playing these games in isolation, right? And I did
Mhm.
engage my family with Wii Sports, and on the DS, I took Professor Layton on a camping trip. And like probably one of the best game experiences I had was sitting around the campfire, passing the DS around, and everybody trying to solve the puzzles
That's
and
awesome.
Professor Layton. That's really cool. And so like it made me think about those moments when you were talking about, your family being engaged with the Wii and DS a bit more. Did anyone in your family have that kind of like because right now you're a Nintendo or I don't know, do you consider yourself a Nintendo commentator or you just think you're a general video game commentator?
Probably a
Where you
Nintendo
put them?
person. I very rarely make the more broad
Yeah.
gaming discussion stuff.
I was thinking about you being mostly Nintendo, then I saw in your games to be a lot of it was like PlayStation games. So I was like, oh, I'm curious if she's like
I
moving
just
away.
got well, it's not just, but, like, in the last 2 years, I got a PlayStation 5, and I didn't have a
Mm,
PlayStation 4, so I am, like, experiencing a lot of, like, really good PlayStation games for the first time, but
mhm.
I also, like I grew up with, like, the PlayStation 2 and the PlayStation 3 and stuff. I wasn't really a big Xbox family, but yeah, all that kinda stuff.
Um, So being like a Nintendo creator, I think at some point you probably had a moment where you're like, "Hey, there's a lot of people on the internet talking about video games and stuff, and getting more engaged in that online gaming community, right?" Um, was any of your family engaged in that stuff beforehand, or is that something that you kind of stumbled into yourself?
Like, the online gaming discourse.
Yeah, I think when you're in the online gaming discourses, you have a greater investment in video games than just somebody having a good time, on a weekend after work, right? You're thinking about these companies in a different way. You're
Yeah.
thinking about these games coming out in different ways. I was curious if you had any experience with people who were doing that before. Or did you just kind of fall into it yourself?
Yeah, my family wasn't super involved in it. My dad watched Linus Tech Tips all the time because
Okay, yeah.
before I did YouTube, I worked at a tech company in my hometown, and I built PCs and stuff for people. So I've always been like, I guess like as comparatively to my friends, a little bit more into it than they were. And honestly, for the most part, I didn't, especially in high school, it was like I gamed for myself. Um, And, like, when like, my boyfriend now plays games and stuff like that, but up until COVID, I would say, like, nobody from my town knew that I was a gamer. Like, that was not my reputation, I guess.
Mhm.
It was a very secret thing for a long time. So,
Intentionally secret or just didn't come up?
yeah, I think it was kind of intentional just because,
Okay.
I would play, like, volleyball, like, a couple hours away from my hometown, so that's usually how people knew me, and I just
Yeah.
felt like I don't know. I was a big partier in high school too, I still am, but I just, like it
Hear
was a
about
bit of a
Josie? She plays Poke Park. Ooh.
yeah. Well, it's just, like, a big vibe,
No,
you know
I
what I mean?
feel you. I feel you.
It's
So,
like they literally none of them would have cared because all of them know now because of YouTube, and they're all, like, super chill about it. It's not a big deal,
yeah.
but it was just, like I think when you're that young, and especially, like, as a girl, I was like, I don't really wanna, like, make this part of, my personality, like,
Yeah.
outwardly with people, I guess." So, because of that, all of the content like, consumed was YouTube, and, like, gaming YouTube.
Mm, mm.
So, I would watch, like, RGT and Spawnwave and, um, like, beat 'em ups and all those people and Wolf Den and everybody like, I would watch their videos all the time, because I loved the conversation around it, I thought it was interesting, um and as I guess, like, I continued to watch all of the discourse unfold, I just felt like there was a big lack of representation, I guess, of, like, younger gamers. Like, it's happening a little bit more now, I think, with TikTok and stuff like that, but my generation was, like, fully not that it was all conversations from millennials and Gen X people, and it's great because obviously, like, their opinions are valid and matter, but I just always found that I had a very different opinion, I guess, than most of them. So it was interesting to watch their stuff, and then I'd be like, "Okay, I think so differently than that," and I always thought it'd be cool to, like, do some sort of thing responding to that or whatever. Um, and then I went to college and I stopped caring what people thought about me. And then I made a YouTube channel. My town's so small that I was really stressed out, like, because I always wanted to do YouTube, but I was really stressed out forever because, like, everybody would find out, and honestly, I was rightfully stressed out because my whole fucking hometown knows now, and they're nice because I'm like, sort of successful, but, like, had they known early on, it, wouldn't have been great.
Yeah, I was outwardly a video game nerd growing up in general, so everybody knew, but
Yeah,
also nobody cared. Also, lots of like you're gonna go nowhere. Which, hey, guess what? Hasn't really worked for me. But I think there's different ways of what it means to go somewhere, right? In terms of there's a financial success, there's an
right,
influence part.
absolutely.
For me, and I feel kind of guilty about this, but I think it's been more of a self growth thing. I
Mhm,
think YouTube has made me challenge myself in different ways, and so there's a lot of things that I think I have been thankful for that I have done this for so long because I know what questions to ask myself in certain situations
mhm.
to try to better figure things out in that regard.
I always
Um,
played games with my brother, though, growing up, like, I
yeah,
always did that, and even in high school, because he's a big gamer, and so is my dad, um so I always played them a lot at home too, so I think that probably really influenced that.
yeah,
And I had a group of, like, guy friends in middle school, and then when they were, like, a year older than me, um, and they were all super into gaming, and they would play, like, D&D and all that kinda stuff, and so I would, like, secretly kinda hang out with them, but, like, it just wasn't, like, a big thing,
yeah.
and everybody knew I was friends with them, but it was just, like, nobody really understood why, and then I made a YouTube channel, and I think it all made sense to people, so.
um, you were talking earlier about like the difference between millennials, Gen X's, and I assume Gen Z's, where you fit in there.
Mhm.
Um, what do you think is like the key differences in terms of how you view games versus older people?
That's a good question. I feel like right now it's really cynical with a lot of older gamers. Um, and it might very well just be because I'm like in a circle. But at least like in my experience, people are very like gaming used to be so much better back then or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, and I feel very differently. Like I think gaming now is really good. It's better than it has been, but, like, obviously, there are bad parts of it. Like, you can't like, if you're only playing AAA stuff or whatever, it's not gonna be great
Yeah.
because that's struggling right now, but it's like indies didn't exist back then, so having that be a thing now is really, really cool. Um so I guess kinda that, and then other than that, it's like the fondness for these old, old, old games that are really hard to go back to and that people haven't played in 40 years or 20 years or whatever, so they're just, like, just going off of
If you
nostalgia
didn't
of
know,
what they
Ocarina of Time
remember.
is 40 years old to everybody listening.
That's not what I'm saying.
I'm
But,
just kidding. It's getting
and
there.
not just Ocarina I
It's
have a very
eventually.
I have a very interesting opinion, I think, on Super Metroid and stuff like that too, so there's just some games that I just, like, and I'll talk about it, and then they'll be like, "Yeah, well, you don't really understand how things were back then." And I was like, "Have you played it in the last 10 years?" And it's always like, "Nah." And I was like, "So, like, it's hard to play now." Um, so I don't know. I just feel like if anything, it's just like a difference of opinion and like what we have nostalgia for. Because a lot of Gen X people and millennial people I've realized don't have very much fondness for the Wii and the DS era.
I think I am an exception in that regard for sure. Like
Yeah.
it was very when I was growing up, the Wii and DS were not liked. And I think
Yeah.
that is a big part of why I became a YouTuber, or I don't know, I guess became a YouTuber. Since why I talked about getting games on the internet, because this was before YouTube that I was like starting to, well, YouTube existed, but I wasn't doing YouTube videos, right?
Uh-huh.
Um, but yeah, there was a lot of hate for Wii and DS. So and
That's
got
funny
it.
because in my circle there was 0, and we were all like, "Oh, this is great," but we were, like, 5 and
Yeah, I
tiny,
mean,
so it's
there
different.
you guys would be probably be categorized in what was at the time called the casual audience,
Mhm.
which basically was a derogatory term for a game. Casual, we garbage, right? And I think it's just a different set of priorities for sure. And
Yeah.
I definitely a lot of The sad thing I think I'm realizing is that a lot of this like stuff of me talking on the internet is a lot of the times where I feel like I think I was just on the defensive so much with so many games growing up that I feel like I have to put my voice out there
Mhm.
anytime I feel like there's a situation where I'm like, hey, I thought Balan Wonderworld was okay, right?
Yeah.
I know people hate it. I think it's an okay video game. But it's
Yeah.
like I don't necessarily like having to do that, but it's also just like, if no one else is gonna
Well,
do
it's
it,
good to get outside of the echo chamber as well.
yeah.
I think that's why the small amount of success that I've seen, which isn't insane, but, like, a little bit of it is probably just because I'm so against the norm of at least YouTube, like, commentary. Um, Because really, like, my first real like, the Switch came out my 8th grade year, so, like, I was, like, 14. So the Switch is really, like, my first real console that I've, like, identified with and loved, and so, yeah, it's just a different set of priorities, I guess.
What do you think is the things about the Switch that stand out most to you?
When I was younger, I was always traveling, and, I played competitive volleyball, like, my whole life, and I would go, um, all over the place, like, to different major cities and stuff all over the US. So, I was always a gamer, but, I was very much a home console gamer for the most part, and once I
Mhm.
realized you could take the Switch on the go, it was kind of a no-brainer.
Did you not have like a 3DS? You had a
No,
DS.
I had a DS, and then I kinda fell out with the 3DS because I was very casual at that point, and I was like I mean, I had a phone, so I was like, "I'll just play, like, Fruit Ninja and shit
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
that."
That makes sense. Yeah.
Especially when you're that young and, like, my parents didn't really wanna buy me one, so like, unless I'm begging for it, so it's but then when the Switch came out, like, I was a lot more educated, I guess, on, like, Nintendo and stuff like that, so I was buying pretty much every major release with my, like, lifeguard money, doing everything I could to, um, do that, and, like, I just think, like, the Switch is a really good social console, like, I'd bring it with me all the time to different things, um, for volleyball usually, and we would play Mario Kart, and I got them, like, on arms and stuff like that, so, like, we play, like, some I don't know, it just provided, I guess, a lot of entertainment for a while, and since it was portable, I would take things like Mario Kart and more, like, multiplayer games, but I'd also, like, sit on the planes for a few hours and, like, play some Breath of the Wild or whatever I wanted to do, so
When you were playing in those situations where you had with the friends, were you mostly playing on just the screen itself or the tablet itself, or were you playing on a TV usually? Like when you're
usually
bringing
just
Mario
the
Kart?
tablet itself.
Okay,
We'd always play, like, sideways Joy-Con tablet and stuff, especially on the planes.
gotcha. That's one of those things that, like, when the first, I don't know if you remember what the original Switch reveal trailer looked like. It's like the house top party kind of
Yeah,
thing
yeah,
going
yeah, the
on.
rooftop party.
And, like, for me, as somebody who's, like, at home all the time, just like, who would ever do that? But it's good to know. I mean, that's one of the things, like, it's depends on where you're at in life and what you're doing, right? And I've been a very isolated person in terms of, like, I'm an introvert. I like
Mhm.
staying home. I do try to get out more often now. And part of this podcast series has been me, like, I'm just gonna reach out to people that I think are interesting,
Yeah.
that I wanna talk to. Like there's something interesting that caught my eye about them, so I want to chat with them. And so trying to reach out more because I think there's value in that. And I think in situations like that where like I looked at that initial thing on the Switch and was just like, why would who's going to housetop parties with a
Yeah.
Switch and
Yeah.
putting it on a thing? And that's cool to know that that was something that you actually did do, maybe not on a housetop party, but with your friends around.
Yeah, occasionally. And now, like, I think since everybody knows so much that I do this stuff, like, every time I go home, we play Mario Kart and stuff, and my friends, um, here in college, like, my boyfriend and his all roommates all play, Smash, like, so much, so the Switch has always just been a very social console, I guess, for me, and that's why I've gotten so much use out of it, but then also, like, I'm fairly extroverted, I think, but I have a battery, like, and I drain really quickly, so
Yeah.
I find that the Switch is a good place to, like, reset a little bit and relax and play some single player stuff, so, yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting because that was something that did, to some extent, come out of the Wii era for you, of this very like social console, right? The Switch
Yeah,
kind of fits that in some ways.
absolutely.
Because I think I wouldn't have told you that was the case if I didn't have that context. So,
Mhm.
um, what do you think you like the least about the Switch era?
That's tough. I don't know, I'm very positive on this console, I'm very, very, like, love it a lot.
Yeah,
Um, I guess it's different, but I it's not the Switch itself, but I think the gaming discourse of it, like, being a power race really pisses me off because
Mm.
I think it's dumb to a certain extent, you know, like, Nintendo's never been successful on that, so why would they go all in on it?
What,
Um,
can you get so I don't really I have kind of selectively removed myself from those circles to talk about that stuff.
if
I l
only. I wish
yeah.
I could do that.
I used to be in those spaces, and I got frustrated by the discourse, like the Wii and the DS, I said earlier. I was just like, I got kinda tired of talking to people about stuff, and so
Yeah,
at some point, it's just like, I'm just gonna go do my own thing. Goodbye.
yeah, super fair.
Yeah.
No, it's kind of exhausting. It's just
Yeah.
people being like, "Oh, like, the Switch can't play this game," or, "Oh, it looks like crap on the Switch." It's like, you're not the audience that this is for. Like,
Yeah.
if you think it looks bad because you can play it on your PlayStation 5, go play it on your PS5. But for people who can't
Yeah.
do that and just have a Switch, it's cool that it's there.
What do you
Um,
think they want out of the Switch in that case?
I think people are usually like idiots and don't really know, especially in that situation. It's just like, because if you want it to be a power race console, if you want it to be the super powerful thing, it can't really be as good of a handheld as it is, right? Like the battery life would deplete super quickly. So I think a lot of it is just complaining to complain, and I hate that. That's, like, honestly what I despise the most about this, like, the conversation around gaming right now. It's just so, like,
I will tell you,
whiny.
it's not right now, it's forever. This
God,
is
it's so
there will always be
whiny.
something people are complaining about. It's just, this why I disconnected, because it just never goes away.
Yeah, and that's
That's
how
why.
I'm pretty selective about it now, but I am on, like, the Spawncast, and it gets brought up a decent amount there.
You also have way more viewers, and it's gonna come to you no matter what. Versus
Yeah.
me, I attract people who only are interested in what I'm doing because I'm going like, you make a buddy mission bond video, the only people who are gonna hit that video are the right type of person to look
Do you
at
know that
buddy
I made
mission
a Buddy
bond.
Mission Bond video?
You did?
Well, sort of. I made a video, like, hunting for that game at Too Many Games.
Oh, awesome.
It was
You should
funny.
send it to me. I didn't see that. No, I need to look at that.
It was funny. I have it back there. I haven't, like, played it yet, but it's
It's
cool.
tough, man. I wish you the best of luck. I am the right type of person to sit down and just suffer through that.
God, I'm gonna need to, like,
But
have, like, Google Translate right on me the whole time too, so I'm a little
have you ever done that before?
no.
Okay, it's tough. But I hope it works out for you. I will say I have played through visual novels without any like Google Translation, machine translation before. There is a level of stuff you can get out of something just from looking at how characters move, how they talk, all that
Yeah.
stuff. But you really have to be paying attention. So,
Mhm.
I hope the best of luck to you in
It
that
looks like
regard.
I mean, your video convinced me initially, so I
I
like
hope
it.
I don't do you wrong.
Nah,
So,
hey, if nothing else, it's a super randomly kinda rare Nintendo game that I happen to have, so I'm
yeah,
down
it's
with it.
cool. It's one of those games that, like, I think a lot of people reported on it not, like, succeeding, because it sold, like, 30,000 units, which in the normal sense is, like, that's crazy low,
Right.
what the heck? But then I looked more into, the developer Ruby Party, which makes a bunch of, like, otome games and things like that, right? Do you know what otome games are?
I don't think so.
They're like, visual novels, but they're dating focused for, handsome men, basically. So
Oh,
you go and date handsome men and stuff like that. And so
lit.
Buddy Mission Bond very much fits in with that, except for maybe a little bit more like boys love in Buddy Mission Bond, since it's more about pairing the men together versus, you know,
Mhm.
a generic female character dating the men, right?
Yeah.
Um, so, but how they all those games only sell like 30, 40K usually. So what
Right.
they get their money from is merchandise. And so they sell merchandise of these characters, and they still are selling Buddy Mission. Well, maybe I shouldn't say still. I haven't seen anything in the last year or so, but as of last year, they were still doing stuff, doing stage plays and things like that in Japan. So
Mhm.
it's a really fascinating space that I didn't really understand before Buddy Mission Bond. And then when I sat down and started looking at it, I was just like, oh, this is actually doing okay. It's just the way it's doing okay is very different than how we understand games do okay in America, which is, I
Yeah.
think, a big part of probably why it didn't get localized as well. It's
Yeah.
just like, we aren't going to be able to get, well, I don't know. I don't really feel like that. I don't know if you'd call it idol culture of like you worshiping a character and spending like 500 to $1,000 on them, if that's as prevalent in the US as in Japan. But
Yeah, I don't know. I
so
mean, could be. I'm very, I think, removed, but
Yeah, this is like the dumb garbage I've gotten into. So this is the stuff I like to look into now because I think it's really interesting.
Have you
Um
seen that game that's like Date Everything? Is this
I
called?
have, yeah. I think that was in a direct, wasn't it? I'm trying to
Yeah.
remember, but
I
yeah.
don't I'm buying it day one. I think it's so funny. I wanna stream that game so much.
I hope you enjoy it. It's an interesting genre. I haven't really given it the time of day that I should. Um there's one I have called Dear My Son.
Mhm.
And it's about a single mom who has a husband who's an archaeologist and he never comes home. And then you
Oh my
eventually are like,
god.
I'm fucking done with this. Is this my understanding of it? I should say it's all in Japanese. And then so you have to raise two kids and then also they have like mentors and stuff. So it's a child raising sim while it's also a dating game because you can date all the mentors, or
That's
you can wait for
hilarious.
your shitty husband to come back and rekindle the fire with them. I'm super excited to check that out at some point because that is like I don't think there's many moms that are protagonists in games ever.
Yeah, no.
So like there's so many dads in games now, but so few moms. I asked somebody about that, and somebody was like, "Samus." I'm like, "Okay, okay."
Samus a mom?
You know the whole lore and like with that where she has a Metroid
With the
like
baby
baby
Metroid?
Metroid thing. Yeah. Adoptive mom kind of thing. So I
Like
could
a
get that.
pet.
Yeah, like a depends on how you want to look at it. I did think it was interesting that you mentioned earlier with Super Metroid because I also played that recently. That was not something I played growing up. And I
Mhm.
was like, this is a really interesting game. But also I think it's really interesting because of how weirdly broken it is.
Oh
And
my
so
god, it's so broken.
the way that people talk about that game is like it's really good. I'm just like, oh man, this game's kind of a messed up.
No, I
But
know. I
but
agree.
I think it's messed up in fun ways. I will say that much. I think that the movement is a nightmare, but that's what makes it interesting. It feels like you're trying to walk on the fucking surface of the moon or something,
God,
right?
it's some of the worst movement ever. I just I don't know. That game is iconic and it is
Yeah,
actually pretty good, but it's just there's a lot that you have to get over. I think it's a good blueprint for like Fusion. Fusion
yeah,
is awesome.
yeah.
Um I've recently been playing Moonstone Island. You know that game?
I don't think so. No,
It's
I'll
sort of
need to
like
look
a
it up.
cozy game. It's like Stardew Valley meets like Pokemon, I guess. So
Okay.
you like it's have this deck builder and you like capture these little guys and you go around and you make a town and stuff. Anyways, I haven't been playing any other aspect of the game except for the fact that you can date every single character. So
Yeah.
I've just been like speed running dating all of them and it's so fun. I
Do you
want
think dating games like? Do you think the dating aspect of games is interesting? I mean, that's the question I should
Yeah,
ask.
I
Like, where
love
are
it.
you at with it? You love it? Okay.
I love it. I think it's fun. I think it's like I honestly I made a video criticizing Pokemon and I was like, "You know what would fix this game? Dating. Let me
Yeah.
date some NPCs."
Yeah.
Honestly, it's just like it'd give us something else to do.
Pokemon's one of those series that even when I was a kid, was like, I'm bored of this, and I never came back.
God, it is like it's just they just need some help. I'm like, "Guys, please, you're the most like they're more profitable than Disney." I was like,
Yeah.
how are you guys doing so poorly right now?"
What was the last Pokemon you liked?
I liked Arceus, actually. I did like Arceus quite a
Okay.
bit. And honestly, I like Scarlet and Violet to a degree. Like, I played so many hours of that game, and I never do that for games I don't like, but it's super broken and super bad. So, like, I enjoyed my time playing it, but looking back, it was kind of terrible, you know?
One thing that I don't know, maybe just to like something for you to think about. I used to say the games I liked were bad a lot when I was growing up, and it created a really bad image for other people with like, you just like bad games. I
Mm,
think the things you like about that don't necessarily have to make it bad, right? Like you can like a broken game and it's fine.
right.
And that doesn't mean it's a bad game. It's just not conforming to the idea of what's a good game, right? I know it's like shorthand to say like what's a good game, um, and what's a bad game, but I think it's something to, as long as that doesn't like get into your head about
Oh,
like
yeah.
I like bad games because that creates a really weird precedent. I
Mm,
still have people today who be like, "Oh, you like that because it's a bad game," which is basically them saying, "I don't trust your taste." And I'm
uh,
like,
that's yeah.
"Okay, I mean, I just wanted to talk to you about this thing I liked."
You know what's funny is I made a
So
video on Donkey Kong Country 2, and I, like, talked about how hard it is because it's a very hard game, and I was like and I would get so mad in these clips, that I was showing, like, for my stream, and people were like, "Wow, like, you don't like the game because it's hard," and I was like, "I talk about how much I love the game, but that it's also hard." I was like,
yeah,
"How
yeah,
is
yeah.
this the interpretation right now?" It's unbelievable, but
There's a lot of things about games that can be, like, very hard and challenging or be bad on paper that when
Well,
you actually play it, it's like, "This is good, actually."
yeah, well, and it's like every Donkey Kong game is kinda brutal, and I was like, "Oh, this is a brutal game, it's really hard." I was freaking out, I was losing my mind, I was super pissed, but when you beat it, it's like it's an amazing feeling, so obviously I do like the game still. It was just always so strange to me. I was like,
This
"Guys,
is
relax."
kind of a side question, but you've mentioned Donkey Kong a lot so far. Is Donkey Kong, like, a really important franchise to you in Nintendo
I guess
realm?
it's the one I've been playing the most recently, so that's probably
Okay.
why I've been saying it so much.
To me, because
Yeah,
I started with the 64 generally, like, Donkey Kong kinda didn't really matter to me, so, like,
yeah,
most of the
valid.
Donkey Kong loved was Donkey Kong Country, which I played when I was a kid, but wasn't like that was like I was like 5 or 4 playing Donkey Kong Country, so, like, I didn't remember it
Yeah.
very well. So,
No, I mean, I grew up with the Wii one, and I played that all the like,
yeah.
Returns all the time. One of the first games I beat, so I think I just always liked it, and then I played Tropical Freeze on the Wii U, um, and that for some reason was, like, super form like, I was screaming in my room how mad I was about random shit, and my parents were like, "You have to stop, you have to relax," and I was like, "No, I'm almost there." Um, so I, like, loved that game a lot, so I think that's probably, like, really what pushed me towards the rest of them.
Yeah. Tropical Freeze specifically or the original
Tropical
one?
Freeze is
Tropical
like
Freeze,
that's my
okay.
favorite game of all time, I think.
Interesting. What do you think that Tropical Freeze is better than the original Returns? Because I think at the time when Tropical Freeze came out, I was like, that's just more Returns. I'm not gonna play this."
Oh, yeah. Yeah, to a degree. I think it kind of, like, elevates everything Returns does. The graphics are much better, it's pretty, it's a very nice looking game. Mechanically, it's a lot smoother. Um, I think they had a lot of cool ideas, and then they all just got, like, taken up to 1,000 with Return or, Tropical Freeze. Diddy being your extra little guy, and then they introduced Dixie and Cranky Kong, which all have different abilities, and, they got sorta creative with the platforming and returns, and then they went insane with Tropical Freeze, like, jumping from in a fruit level from, like, different fruit to other
Yeah.
fruit, and, like, it was just kinda cool,
It's
and it
I
was
think it's
so
cool that the
hard.
challenge seems to be a big part of that for you because I think a lot of times actually, this might be after there was a while where, like, nobody wanted hard video games.
Yeah.
So but I think maybe that would have been after, like, the people turned around, like, Dark Souls, I think, was kind of the big one that turned people around on hard games in the mainstream again, which I
Yeah.
think would have been, like, 2012. Yeah, so that's quite a bit before that, but
I mean, I love it. I like hard games though for the most part. People people like to say that I don't because in my streams it looks like I don't. But I
streaming's
do.
hard, man. Playing games and well, for me, playing games and
Yeah.
streaming is hard.
Well,
So
it's just like I was like I'm not going to mask how I'm feeling. I obviously still love this game, but I'm going to
yeah.
lose my shit real quick.
My therapist called, stuff like that miserable fun, and I'm like, "That
Yeah.
sounds about right."
Yeah, basically.
It's like, "You're suffering, but you'll love it later."
Yeah,
So
no, that's entirely what happened with Donkey Kong Country 2. Like after I beat that game, I was like, "Oh, euphoric." But when I was in it, I was like, "I am going to lose my mind. I'm going to freak out."
do you feel like Donkey Kong Country 2 is a game that hasn't aged well as well at all in any way,
I
or
no, actually, I think it's aged really well. I think all those Donkey Kong games have aged phenomenally because platforming as a mechanic hasn't changed that much.
Gotcha.
Um, and there's not much to fuck up there. Like, are the movement mechanics okay? Are they like not super slippery? Um, and they are. They hold up pretty well there. I mean, the difficulty, like I wouldn't recommend playing it the way that I played it, which is like at least just to, like, other people my age, which is I played it very much like how everybody grew up with it, like, I didn't use save states or anything like that,
Yeah, yeah.
but I do think that it could benefit a lot of people by just saving after beating every level. Um, I don't think you should use rewinds because I do think that might take it away a little bit, but I mean, like, I would beat, like, an insane, like, stretch of levels, um, and then I would die to this ridiculous boss that I hadn't seen their pattern yet, so I didn't know what was coming, and I would have to redo the 4 levels leading up to that,
Yeah.
and I was, like, livid. So, I don't know. Like, what's funny is Donkey Kong Country Returns is kind of hard too. It's a decently difficult game, um, but I think it fully takes away most of the challenge because of the fact that you can just save like it auto saves after
Yeah.
every level, which I'm
There's a feeling of, like, tension that comes from that, I feel like, of just, like, "I've gotta do this or else I'm going back
yeah,
to
and
the beginning
that
of this world."
feeling is always really bad when I get it because I just fall apart and can't do it. So it's
That's
like
part of
this.
the fun, I feel like, though, right? That's part of why people like that, I think.
Yeah,
Um,
maybe,
and
maybe,
save
maybe.
states give you an option, I feel like, right? And that's, like, a
Exactly. That's
personal
why I think
choice.
it's like I think it's definitely should be personal preference, but like if
Yeah.
it's gonna freak you out to have to redo like the last 5 levels, like
Yeah.
say like on it genuinely, I think if I wasn't streaming it, I might have done that.
Interesting, so specifically for streaming it, is it because it's more entertaining to watch somebody suffer on a stream?
I think it's a little bit of both, but it's also like
Yeah.
you have all these people who are really rooting for you, and
Mm, mm.
most of my audience is older than me, or not like yeah, I guess a lot of them are. So like these are the games that they grew up with, and they want to see me play them correctly, which is like valid.
Don't say correctly.
Well, that's
Play
what they say.
correctly is very exclusionary, I feel like.
Well,
There's a lot of different ways to play games. So,
right, but I guess it's just like the traditional way is what they
yeah,
want to
yeah.
see.
As originally designed.
Right. Which is
So
fair. I mean, I think if you're playing a platformer and you're rewinding every 2 seconds, it does sort of take away from the experience a little
yeah,
bit.
sure. I used to do a lot of save states when I was revisiting a lot of Sega Genesis games, actually,
Mhm.
specifically, because I was just like, I don't have patience for this. And I do think it took something away doing that all the time. But I think everyone's going to have their own level of tolerance for that, right? So it's
You
nice
know
that it's a
what's funny is
choice.
I tried to rewind in, like, the original Metroid on the SNES.
Mhm.
I don't dislike very many games, like, actually. Like, I think Ocarina of Time's fine, you know, like, I don't
Yeah.
actively hate it. That game I hate. I, like even trying to just rewind it and, like, get through a very simple time, I was like, "I'm going to lose my fucking mind." Like, there's no way to play this game normally. And then all the comments were like, "You have to dedicate hours and hours and hours." And I was like, "I'm in school, I have a job, and I
Yeah.
do this on the side.
I got
How the
time to
hell
play
am I
through
gonna
this
do that?"
once.
Yeah, like,
Yeah.
absolutely, how the hell am I gonna do that?
Sorry, you were 8 and had nothing else to do.
Yeah.
So
Shit, man, my bad. You wanna work my job? You wanna pay my rent? Please.
someone did offer me $100 play through Chrono Trigger. I did
Mm,
not take him up on it, but it was
that's
a
hype.
long time ago. That's funny. I don't think
I
they were
was
serious.
sometimes I get super chats of people being like, "Play this game right now," and I'm like, "Guys, dude, going against the entire stream right now. Thank you for the super, but I can't do that."
I know this is like a hard 180 back, but I did want to kind of talk a little bit more about the Switch itself. Um, I'm trying to remember, did we ever say what you didn't like about the Switch? I feel like we were
I
like,
said I didn't like
that's
the
a hard
discourse.
question.
You know what? Actually,
Gaming discourse. Okay, yeah.
I don't. I do think that they are going way too hard with like valuing their IPs right now. Like
Mm.
the fact that
Yeah,
there's
maybe I
been
should
no.
open up to just Nintendo as a whole during this era, not just the Switch. Sorry, but
Yeah,
yeah.
but it's like Nintendo Selects on the Wii U is the reason why I played most of the games I did.
Mm.
So I think it's just kind of shitty that we don't do any of that. It's like games that have already sold hundreds and or uh like multi-million like sellers, you know? It's just like why not just mark them down to 20 and Nintendo
I'm sure
selects
there's a
it?
lot of somewhere internally there's a chart that says why not to, right?
I'm
But
sure. It just feels a little
but
I do feel like there's been certain points of the Switch generation where I'm like, it feels like you guys are being a little greedy.
yeah,
Or like even Donkey Kong Country Returns, this game that just came out, it's like, it's just not worth $60 at all.
yeah.
Like,
And
if I
Skyward
wasn't
Sword was 60, right? As well.
Skyward Sword was that one they did a little bit more to it because they like
Mm,
translated you know, the emotion over, but
true.
yeah, still, I mean, that should have been like a $40 release. I mean, this Country Returns is a port of the 3DS port. It's a port of a port. Like, it should be $40 at the max.
Yeah.
So, I guess that's probably what I dislike the most. What do you think about the Switch?
Did you buy the Donkey Kong for 60?
Yeah.
You caved.
Well, okay, I have a lot of nostalgia for it, and I was like, business expense, I have to play it on stream.
Yeah, you have an incentive to for sure. I have generally when it comes to price, I kind of don't pay too much attention to it, which part of it is because I have the luxury not to pay attention to it, right? Obviously depends on your income, right?
Yeah.
But I think part of it's also because I try not to associate game value to price very often. There's some extreme cases as much. I have paid like $40 for games that are like 30 minutes long though. The
Wow.
Japanese like indie scene, they sometimes will price their games at worth, which I think is a good thing, right? Like somebody made their own thing, they're going to charge $40 for it. It might be 30 minutes long, but it was a good experience, and I supported them and paid what I wanted to. Um, and video games in general in Japan are more expensive,
Yeah.
um, but yeah, I think it's a hard conversation because it is like, hey, here's this video game, and I could potentially go play the Wii version for cheaper. I
Mhm.
don't know how much it is, but there's a lot of options. But yeah, at some point it's just like, well, but it's so much accessible on the Switch, and it's only $20 more. so, but
Yeah.
but yeah,
Yeah,
like
I
you
don't know.
said, you have like an incentive for a work perspective, right?
Right.
Because you do, as far as I understand, make money off your YouTube, or
I
some
just feel like
amount of
if
money. So
if I were to not be a YouTube person, like, I definitely wouldn't have bought it, at least now. I
gotcha.
probably would've waited. Like, when Tropical Freeze came to the Switch, I waited until Black Friday and got it for 20 bucks,
Yeah,
and that was before YouTube. So I think I definitely, like, if I didn't have a channel, I wouldn't have done
yeah.
that.
To get back, so you were asking me how I felt about Nintendo today, or is that what your question
Yeah, how do
was?
you
Or
feel about the Switch?
yeah, so that is, so and don't feel like you had to have done this, but I did send you that video that I was working on. Um, it is basically that. That's basically what that video is. Which is essentially, I think I was so kind of whisked off my feet from the Wii
Mhm.
that the Wii U, 3DS, and Switch era, I think I just didn't really care that much about them. And I kind of just went elsewhere and just started looking at different games. I think a lot of the weird stuff I'm into is, I could be wrong, but very directly affected by me being like, the Wii drove me to look for games that are trying different things, right? And
Mhm.
looking for different audiences, right? I feel like I'm kind of turning around though. And I think my relationship with Nintendo probably only goes uphill from here. I could be wrong, but I was playing Game Builder Garage. Um, and I think there's like a lot to like about that game. I'm not the kind of person to like games like that. But I
Mhm.
think there's just and maybe this like helped me better understand Breath of the Wild, because I did not like Breath of the Wild at the time. But I've just like, I think there's more importance to let players kind of like create more in games, and like to express themselves more in games than when I was growing up, right?
Mhm.
And I feel like that game, when you separate it out from Zelda, because I was frustrated by Breath of the Wild and like the things it focused on. When I play a game that's like dedicated to that, I was like, oh, this feels like it makes a lot more sense. Because I
Mhm.
think a lot of people, I don't know if you played Minecraft at all growing up,
Oh,
but
yeah.
like I feel like a lot of people got a little bit of that. Like, I like to manipulate the world in a game more than what I would get growing up, right? I could be wrong about that. That might be me overthinking it.
No,
So
I think so.
so, but yeah, I mean, Buddy Mission Bond is something I still love. But that's technically a Tecmo Koei thing, or Koei Tecmo. I don't remember which way it is. I really liked DC Superhero Girls, which again is another Tecmo Koei thing that Nintendo published. But that was like a really interesting use of like social media in an action game. I thought that was like fascinating. And
Mhm.
then I think Labo's very cool. Those are kind of the only things I really grabbed onto this generation. And so the Switch is not a system that I've hated, but I would say I've been very indifferent towards it, right? Um, but when I look at the library, it's really hard to say like it was a bad system, right? It's like
Yeah.
there's so much good about it. And I think a lot of like the things that I hear people complain about the Switch, like I said earlier, is stuff that I feel like people will complain about no matter what.
Right.
Um, you know, Sitting there and arguing about like the Switch's power on a system that thrives off, you know, being the lower powered system. Not thrives off it, but thrives despite, maybe. That's a
Mhm.
better way to put it. It's weird.
I agree.
So I don't know if that's an interesting answer or not, but
So if the Switch like, what would you wanna see from a console that would make you, like, love it, love it?
maybe that gets into like my next question for you, honestly. Cause Switch 2, by the time we were recording this, Switch 2 was announced, right? There's
Mhm.
a video. So whatever's happening, a few weeks from now, who knows? But that's the context of what we have here. And I think I looked at the Switch and I was just like, oh, okay, Switch 2. And I was like, okay, that's how it kind of felt. But I
Mhm.
also knew that people were excited about it. So I went and looked at like reaction videos. I watched your reaction video and a handful of other people, and
Mhm,
people would say it's big. This is big. This is exciting. And I couldn't really put my finger on why it was big or why it was exciting. So I would say right now, I am less interested in what I'm excited about or interested because I think what I would tell you is very much like I don't think I know what I want, if that makes
mhm,
sense. So I don't want to necessarily say too much because I think what I would do is I would say something in line with the Wii, but I don't think that is needed in today's market. I also
mhm,
think that my idea of what the Wii was wrong. I think your experience with the Wii represents more of what the Wii was, in my opinion. And it sounds like the Switch did some of that, right? Or at least a little
mhm.
bit for you. Um, so it's hard for me to say what I would want. So I'm kind of curious to throw it back at you.
It's valid.
What do you want out of it, right?
Uh, the Switch t so yeah, I am excited. I was really excited that it was confirmed that it was actually happening,
Yeah.
in a decent timeline.
And we've had
Um
like 4 years of them being like people being like, there's gonna be new Switch
Oh
hardware,
my
right?
god, I
So
know, and I was like, "Thank God the fucking rumor mill can just chill out a little bit." Like, it was just it was insane.
to kind of delay you a little bit, like as a creator, how did that feel? Because like I look at that and go, I don't want to talk about this every goddamn week on my podcast. Like
Yeah.
I'm good, but you kind of have to address it. I feel like, right? Like you can't just ignore it, right?
I think it was a little bit freeing, honestly, that it was finally announced because otherwise
Yeah.
we would have just talked about stupid rumors that are either have some merit or are pointless, and, like, I don't know. It was just a lot of, like there was a lot of weird discourse online of people being like, "It's this week, it's this week, it's this week," and I was like, "Now everybody could chill out a little bit and focus on, like, what's actually exciting about this console, and have something concrete to talk about."
Was there anything about the rumor cycle that you enjoyed at all?
I like the speculation to a degree. Like, I had a good time trying to figure out what I thought they were gonna, go for,
Mhm.
and I think it's cool. It was like the speculation every single day by the same people. I was like, "Y'all have already gotten your point across, we gotta relax."
Yeah.
Um, so I was pretty relieved when it was announced, and then also, like, I was really excited that they didn't go some crazy new way, and they decided to keep it hybrid console adjacent, um, because the Switch is incredibly successful, and it's really, really impressive what they've done. So if they were to pivot 100%, like, that's just kind of a crazy business call, and I love the form factor of the Switch, so I wouldn't it feel almost like a regression to go back to anything else, I think.
So what gets you excited about the Switch 2?
I guess the fact that it's a continuation of what made the original Switch great. I think in my head, it's just like, the original Switch was so good. This is the better version of the original Switch with ideally, like we don't know the exact specs yet, but we have seen I mean, the whole console basically leaked out before it was announced, so and we have leaked specs, so it's probably gonna be a fairly powerful console with the DLSS or whatever their Nintendo ends up calling their AI upscaling is pretty exciting as well because that means, like, much bigger games can run on the system, and hopefully it doesn't date itself as fast as the Switch did. Um,
Because yeah, we were talking earlier, we are talking about how in some ways you kind of felt like graphics didn't really matter that much on the
yeah,
Switch, but it sounds more about expanding the scope of what can be on the Switch, is what it sounds
exactly.
like.
Yeah, it's not like I really don't care about graphics nearly at all, but it's like, I would like it if the Pokemon game could run well, you
Yeah.
know? Like
You enjoyed it despite that, though.
right, but I would prefer if it ran,
If you had another
um
choice, you'd potentially buy it on a PS5 if you could
yeah,
have.
maybe.
If you had
Um,
yeah, I guess there's more to the Switch than just power though. There's the portability aspect too.
yeah.
So,
So, yeah, I don't know, I think I was just very excited that it was a continuation of some sort, and then also that it's real and that it's, like, a concrete announcement,
yeah.
and we have a timeline again, like I've said. Um,
That's
I
interesting
guess
that it's like the commitment is like what gets you excited. Like the commitment to continue what was already working, right?
yeah. Well, I mean, I feel like that's a tough thing with Nintendo, usually they don't do that.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things that I don't know if I recognized this at the time, but looking back, the Wii to Wii U, the Wii sales had dropped off hard by the time the Wii U came out. And like the thing they're trying to do with the Wii just didn't work anymore. And so like they really had to reshift into like a new direction with that, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if the Switch have they ever been in position with the Switch 2? The I guess maybe the Super Nintendo NES to Super Nintendo, where there hasn't been like some major shakeup, right?
I guess, like, the DS to the 3DS,
Mm, yeah, I guess they tried to sell the 3D aspect of it.
but then they released the 2DS.
Yeah. I think that they got the initial excitement. I think it was a very Wii kind of thing where it was like we got that initial excitement, right? We caught this wind and rode it a little bit, whether they were successful or not, but they were trying to do that. And I think the Switch doesn't really have that, right? I think the Switch just kind of works how it is right now. And you
Mhm.
have competition coming up, but it's very late, right? With Steam Deck and
Yeah,
stuff like
yeah,
that.
and it's honestly a different market.
Hmm.
I think there's a lot of casual people who will buy a Nintendo Switch and just be excited that they can play Mario, um, and get in on the hype. Steam Deck is pretty niche. That's for
Yeah.
people who are gamers, and they want to take if you have a PC library, to some extent, you're a gamer, like, for sure, more than just, like, somebody who goes out and grabs a Switch and throws a game in it.
Hmm. I wonder. I'm trying to think if I agree with that or not. Because like my dad plays PC games. My dad plays Call of Duty. The one thing he play every year,
Yeah,
Call of Duty.
yeah,
And so I would not call him. I mean, he plays games. I would not put him in the same category as like somebody who's actively digesting a lot of games, right? And I think he would probably get a Steam Deck, but it's a very different audience. Maybe it's just the age range that matters more. Somebody who's younger, like I don't think you're going to hand a Steam Deck to an 8-year old, or you'll hand a
right.
Switch to an 8-year old. I
I
wonder
just
if
feel
that
like people
matters.
who aren't, like, fairly plugged in don't even know about a Steam Deck.
There hasn't been a huge campaign for it, for sure.
Like,
Like,
most of my like, I have friends who play Smash all the time, and they're big into Mario Kart and Mario Party and stuff like that, and they like it to play, like, with their friends, but they have no idea what a Steam Deck is, you know?
do you think it's more of a brand recognition thing rather than like? Because I'm trying to think if there's anything about the Steam Deck as a platform that would be difficult for somebody to
Well, it's
engage with.
based off of Steam, and I think that Steam is less straightforward than, like, a Nintendo,
Yeah.
um, operating system.
Also, anything you play on a Switch will work, where a Steam Deck, there's
You
a
can't
yeah,
people don't know how to tweak stuff like that, like,
you know,
it's not very it's great if you're a gamer, I think,
yeah.
but if you understand a a good bit, and there's a bunch of different versions of a gamer, like, a cozy gamer could love this, and, like, a casual, like, plugged in fan could love it, but I think if you want a handheld console, you're gonna gravitate towards the Switch 99% of the time.
Yeah, yeah. The whole console market in general has been really weird recently. I wasn't intending to talk about this, but we're talking about it now. If you're not interested, let me know. This is going
That's
beyond
okay.
Nintendo. The whole console market, I feel like everyone's questioning it right now. You know, Microsoft's, if you're following that, they are basically probably done with consoles. Who's to say? At least
Yeah,
consoles in the way they've been presented before. Let's put it that way. And then Sony's going through some weird stuff right now, but it's not as I'd say public. But I think there's this real question of like, where do game consoles go from here? And I don't think we're asking that question about Nintendo right now. Um,
right.
but with them, we are. What do you have any thoughts on that right now? Of like what you're seeing in that space? And I think a general bigger reliance on PC from people to play games as well.
Um, yeah. Well, it's really uncertain right now, I feel. So it's like Xbox is going through this whole thing where they're putting everything third party,
Hmm.
um, which is kind of insane in my opinion, and I don't know. I think exclusives can be pretty important to sell a console, so I'm intrigued by what they plan to do
Hmm.
um in the future, because they've also made it clear that they're not going to drop out of the console race, but like if your games are playable on everything, what is your console? Like what's gonna sell it?
And I think there's one
Especially
thing to be saying we're not going to come out of a drop out of the console race versus like the business decision to do so, right?
yeah.
You can say one thing and still do it later. And
Oh, yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
so
And Microsoft is notorious for that, so they might. But the other thing about Microsoft that I've learned recently is that they have copious amounts of money, so they don't really need to do anything that makes sense, you know? unfortunately. I think that Sony is gonna probably continue to do what they've been doing because 'cause they've been successful. Um, you know, ideally, their time for making games can be sped up a little bit, and their budgets need to, like, not balloon as high as they have been because that's been holding them back in a lot of ways, and with the success of Astrobot, hopefully they realize that there is, like, a path forward.
Did Astrobot succeed from a financial perspective, or was it just a critical critic?
It sold millions of copies,
It did?
so
Okay.
it should, and also it won Game of the Year and stuff like that, and as much as that doesn't matter to most companies, Sony kinda cares about that stuff.
Yeah, 1.5. That's I don't know the budget of it. That's the bigger thing, but
The
1.5 seems
budget was
okay.
very
Yeah.
small. It was a second party game, basically, so it was
Yeah.
pretty, so hopefully with that, they realize, like, they don't have to put, millions of dollars into something that needs to sell 10 million copies to even recoup back, like, the baseline. Um, I think it's pretty uncertain though, like, are we gonna get a PlayStation 6 in the next couple of years? Probably not. It looks like consoles are gonna have a much longer lifespan than
Yeah.
before.
I
Um,
mean, I don't know if you saw, but like I think it was like 6 months ago or something like that. There's like numbers out that like over 50% of PlayStation Network users were PlayStation 4 users still.
yeah, right,
So
exactly. People don't really wanna move over. It's kind of, like, leads into a weird conversation about the economy too, like, is the economy gonna be good enough to,
yeah,
like, release a new console for as expensive as they want? I
yeah,
don't know. At least in America right now, it's a little iffy, so
yeah, yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know. I think there's a lot
I guess you don't see it being the same though, right? You think there is movement happening there for them?
yeah. Yeah, I think it's definitely at least with Microsoft. I think Sony's probably gonna stay fairly similar, and maybe Nintendo becomes a bit more consistent. Um, Hopefully that doesn't tarnish their creativity though, because that's where Nintendo does really well and shines, I think. Uh, but yeah, Microsoft is definitely gonna be moving to something. I don't know what or how.
For people making those videos about like Nintendo being kind of stagnant, like what do you feel about those videos? Do you think any of that is truth or not? Or if you've seen
No,
them, I
I
get
have se-
delivered them, but I
I've seen him a little bit. I mean, I
I don't
don't.
agree with them. But
Yeah, it's just what do you want him to do? Like business wise, it makes way more sense to do something that they know is going to succeed. Nintendo got like bit in the ass with the Wii U. So I don't know why people think that they would return to something like that could confuse people or I don't know. Like the Wii U just like really I think woke Nintendo up and made them realize that they can't just throw anything out there. Um The Wii
I
U, in my opinion, was great. I think it's a very good console, and I love it a lot, but commercially, it's not successful.
yeah, yeah. I think, and as I kind of mentioned earlier, like the Wii sales died off really late in the Wii cycle, where it was like, in some ways, I don't think there's a lot of brand retention anymore.
Uh-huh.
Like, I think the Wii audience went to mobile, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And or like who they're reaching. And so I think there is something to be said about the Wii U as a concept of a console. I mean, all these systems are very difficult. And I don't know if you listened to Reggie or read Reggie Fils-Aimé's book. I listened to the audiobook version.
I
I
haven't.
wish he went in more detail about the Wii U specifically because he kind of glosses over it. He's like, "Oh, the Wii U happened.
Yeah.
It wasn't very good.
Well, and that's
Hey,
the
the
thing, though, I
Switch
think
though."
yeah, I mean, that's it, though. They wanna forget about it and not deal with
Yeah.
it, so it's like, why would they put themselves in this situation to do it again? And also, by releasing a console that is smart business-wise and stuff like that can ideally give them a little bit more financial freedom to take risks with the games that they put on it and the
Yeah.
software.
Yeah, I guess maybe the point I was trying to get to with that was like they don't have a financial need to right now. The
No.
GameCube, they had a reason. The Wii, they had a reason. The
Yeah.
Switch is doing great, man. Why? Yes, people are going to launch their competitive thing. We'll deal with that later.
Yeah, and
Like,
it's like not even all those things that have been the ROG Ally, everything like that hasn't even touched in Nintendo. Like it hasn't
yeah,
touched their sales at all. It's I don't know.
Sony
I
and
think people
Microsoft, I
make
think, have bigger potential to do something, but I
yeah,
think it would be a
for sure.
very long term thing. This is not like in the next 5 years, Nintendo will be like, "Oh my god, I wish we did something better," right?
Yeah, no.
So
And like
And
I really
you can kill
like
a console early, right? That is we
yeah.
killed a Wii U early. So
Yeah. I like the idea of them also, like, releasing something that's makes, like, sense and is a normal console, and then they can get weird with the games, because I think that's really where we should be creative. Forcing creativity on games that don't need it is terrible. Like, the Wii Waggle controls, people were so pissed about that, and it's like, you force these controls on games that shouldn't have them, arguably.
yeah.
Um, so, that complaint won't happen with the Switch too. So, I think those people are just very, like, okay, I'm gonna get my honest take on it is that people who make those videos know that there's a small audience of people in on Twitter who think similarly, and they capitalize on it and expand it into a thing that doesn't matter to make money.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
it's all to make money.
Oh, yes. I mean, yes.
Like,
At
there's
the end,
like
Nintendo is
most
there to make money, but obviously people within the company have their own incentives, right? But
yeah, and like the people who make those videos, like it's literally like most of the time, a lot of them don't believe it, and they're just like, "Oh, like let me spout this crap so that I can make money
mhm.
and AdSense."
One of the things that I am very regretful for, and I wish I was better about this, and I think this year, maybe New Year's resolution this year is to overly assume how people present themselves. Do you feel like there's anything you have done on your channel that feels like I'm playing this up? Similar to like maybe what we talked about earlier with like it seemed more appropriate for you to like struggle with Donkey Kong on stream versus like in person, right? And it's like a different environment. But I think some people might interpret that as you're going to look angrier so you get more views, right? Do you feel like there's
Yeah.
anything that you've done that either can fit in there or could be misinterpreted as that? Maybe like even your Super Metroid or Ocarina of Time opinions, right? Like those are things that I think people assume
I
you're
guess
just trying
yeah,
to
I guess the only thing
blame.
that would make sense is like Ocarina of Time,
Yeah,
but I do that sarcastically. I think people just don't really understand sarcasm super well.
yeah.
And
Well,
um
I will say that like as much as it sounds like there's a legitimate reason under there though.
well
Like,
there is
yeah.
for sure. It's just it's not I would but I do like I exasperate it a little bit in my videos as a joke, but people don't really get the joke, which is fair cuz it's mostly a joke for myself. Um But I think that's really the only thing. Like, other than that, I feel like if you watch my streams of, like, Donkey Kong, the progression of me being like, "Okay, I'm not angry, I'm fine, I'm literally fine," to, like, beating up this chair is, like, it kinda makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm
Um
curious, like, how many people think about that because, like, when I see horror games and things like that, right? When people start screaming on horror game streams, I'm
Oh,
like,
yeah.
how much is that is real? Or how much is that
Well,
is I
it's
wanna
definitely, like
give the YouTube audience something?
the genre of streamers and stuff right now is very performative.
Mm,
Like Speed and Kai, they're very good at what they do, but they're very performative. Um they jump because they know kids are watching them, and so they like really exaggerate all of their emotions and stuff.
yeah,
Um, so there might be a little bit of truth to it, but yeah, for the most part. But it's also like it is entertainment, so you might as well make it entertaining to a degree. Um,
yeah,
like I, I don't know, I think it's different, but I do think it's like there is a different thing between like making something a little bit more entertaining and completely changing your views and everything you believe in
yeah,
for more money on YouTube. It's like all the super crazy grifters do it on YouTube all the time.
yeah. I will say that when, so this video I'm working on right now, believe it or not, I wrote it in 2023 and
Wow.
made a whole video and looked at it and was like, this is fucking stupid. Because I was like, my logic didn't make any sense, but I thought it made sense, right? And when I sat down and reflected on it, I think sometimes there's just not enough time as a creator who's trying to get traction to rethink things, right? You kind of just
Yeah.
have to put something out. And that's one thing I think I have the luxury of is that like cuz I don't make money from what I do, right? I very rarely will break like 5,000 views on something and even then that's like oh we got somewhere.
Yeah,
um,
for sure.
I think I get a lot more opportunity to take a step back and in the case of this video spend 2 years rethinking it, right? So yeah, I guess and going down that line of thought, I just wanted to kind of like question that a little bit because I do think even though like some people it's like easy to say like oh they're just doing it for the views. A lot of times I do think they are legitimately um feeling that way. So I don't know, you're pretty young, right? And so I don't really know how you feel about video games as a whole. I have known video games like my entire life, right? And I think a lot of people would be like, "Oh, you're gonna grow out of video games at some point, right?" And,
Mm.
as I've gotten older, clearly that unfortunately or fortunately has not happened, depending
Mhm.
on who you're asking. And I still love video games a lot. And I think, a lot of people I know as I've gotten older have fallen out of love with games. I'm curious, like, when you think about video games, you are in college, as long as you're okay saying that on the
Yeah,
podcast.
of course.
Um, like, do you feel like video games are something that 10 years from now you'll be excited in the same ways, or do you feel like it's something that you'll kinda ultimately, I don't know if move on from, but maybe your relationship will change to be a very different thing with video games?
That's a good question. I've been playing Nintendo my whole life. So, I think it's a comfort thing, honestly, is I will probably continue to at least play Nintendo. Um, and I've recently gotten into, like, other games, some PC stuff and a little bit of PlayStation 5 and Xbox games, so it's like, I kinda feel like I'm now just getting started and getting more interested. Um, as long as the entire industry doesn't shift to something stupid, I'll probably be interested in it, you
Yeah.
know? I might switch it up and because I really fell in love with, like, the cozy game genre,
Mm.
the last couple months, and so I might switch up, like, the games I'm interested in, but I do think to some degree I'll probably always be interested in games. Just because I like the way they tell stories. It's a good way for, at least, like, with my friends, it's a good way to, like, connect. We play Fortnite together all the time randomly, so it's just, like, weird stuff like that. Like, I like that, and I like making videos on them too, so I just think there's a lot of incentives about, like, probably me being fairly interested in it forever.
Sometimes I feel a bit guilty about how much I bring up age in a conversation. I'm talking people my age or older. I think it's a way to kind of convey that it's difficult for us to understand what younger people want in a way that I feel like often is me kind of trying to dismiss somebody's concerns. And then from to younger people, it can be a way to feel like you're kind of pushing authority. I mean, I feel like something I did in this episode when Josie brought up the fact that she was like, "Oh, the gaming discourse around the Switch has been bad." I'm like, Josie, it's always bad. But that's something that I'm saying from the many years of me kind of being in this online space. And I think I shouldn't look at it as a bad thing per se, right? With age comes some level of wisdom, and with youth comes, I think, in a lot of ways, a view of what will be important in the future, right? And it's more of probably two sides of a coin, even though, it's not necessarily a binary thing of like how age impacts us. As time marches on, the values of people slowly change. But, when you're 10 to 15 years out, it becomes a lot more apparent. But I think it's really awesome that like Josie, appreciates kind of what comes before and is curious about what comes before. And I think that's really cool. And I think that's really important to, understand, where games have come from, where people have come from. But I think it's also just as important to make sure, we extend, our arm the other way. I think YouTube has been like a great platform for people like Josie to kind of come and say like, hey, here's my view on games. And it gives them the tools to convey that, especially in a space so dominated by, older dudes and things like that, right? And I've definitely learned a ton here, right? I feel like I have never really thought about, how important the social aspect of the Nintendo Switch probably was, and how much that plays a role, and how important games like Mario Kart are, right? I also think that it's interesting that the continuation of the Switch is what kind of makes it exciting. And initially I thought that was kind of a little weird that we would like kind of want things to always stay the same. But if you haven't watched my Nintendo video yet, I think like the thing that I talked about in there was the idea that like the initial launch of the Wii was something I really wanted Nintendo to kind of maintain course on, right? With games like Wii Sports, Wii Play, and things like that, and experiences like that. And, I think I can kind of sympathize with like wanting to continue that excitement. And, it's weird to think about it, but in some weird ways, like constantly wanting that change, or constantly pursuing new audiences with new types of experiences, in some ways is kind of like wanting things to stay the same. So I think it's one of those things that like the core desire aligns actually very well. I've been in a really kind of weird mood with Nintendo, and it's been interesting to kind of navigate, and I hope it brings me to a position where I have a lot more positive feelings on them today and hopefully long term. And I hope Josie continues to like Nintendo as well. I think that's one of the best things, is if you can find excitement that lasts a lifetime, right? So anyways, find out if that's the case on Josie Woah's YouTube channel. Josie Woah. They also have a Twitch that they stream on. I'm gonna go ahead and link her link tree. She has a pretty extensive link tree with pretty much access to everything you'd ever want to for her. She actually, one thing that didn't end up on the show is she actually does film a little bit in school, and so you can actually go watch her short film called First Shift over on YouTube. So I think that's really cool as well. So go check those things out. And, I really hope that Josie and I hope everybody else here listening, continues to love games as long as they can.